It is nearly guaranteed at this point that we're going to be in a La Nina phase by the time we approach the fall months between the months of September and November, and that could mean big things when it comes to the type of conditions you should expect over Europe during the fall months. And this is how La Nina years compare to average years between the years 1980 and 2021 when it comes to air temperature anomaly. And we clearly see that during La Nina years, it's simply a lot cooler throughout Europe, especially more so right around Central Europe. Eastern Europe is a little bit closer to average when it comes to temperatures, but for Central Europe, it's typically much cooler than average. We do see some portions of Spain and the United Kingdom have a small area where the temperatures are a little bit closer to average, but for the most part, expect colder than average conditions. We should expect colder than average conditions during La Nina years, but we need to take a look at other factors before we automatically jump into that conclusion, because of course, not every La Nina year is the same. We also need to take a look at stuff like the sea surface temperature anomalies, as well as the drought monitor over Europe, before we can jump to the conclusion that temperatures will be colder than average this fall for the entirety of Europe. Here are the precipitation anomalies for La Nina years compared to long-term average between 1980 and 2021, and we clearly see it's a little bit more moist than usual right around Central to Eastern Europe, and this extends a little bit further northward into Northern Europe as well. So typically during La Nina years, you do experience a little bit more storms moving through, a little bit more rainfall in general, and then for the western portion of Europe, we see that conditions are drier than normal, despite the fact that temperatures are a little bit cooler than average, even as far west as France and Spain. So typically during La Nina years, you should expect drier conditions, but we need to take a look at other factors before we can jump to that conclusion, like I said earlier. Another reliable source when it comes to forecasting the long-term conditions for a certain area is taking a look at climatology models, and this specific model combines a lot of the most reliable climatology models into one run, which likely gives one of the more accurate representations of what to expect during the winter. Of course, computer models are certainly far from correct a lot of the time, but I'll say that you should expect what the computer models are stating as the more likely scenario compared to a scenario that's different from what it's comparing. So taking a look at what this computer model is stating when it comes to temperature anomaly, we do see that the NMME model is forecasting temperatures throughout Europe to be mainly slightly warmer than average, but of course we clearly see that the anomaly isn't very strong, so I easily could see this being offset by the fact that we're going to be in a La Nina. So I'd expect temperatures for the most part to be a little bit closer to average, with potentially the exception being towards Northern Europe, where the temperature typically during La Ninas as well is a little bit closer to average, and the fact that the contours is a little bit stronger towards Northern Europe indicates that it's more they're more likely to experience slightly warmer than average conditions for the fall months. But for the rest of Europe, I'd expect temperatures closer to average this winter, and most likely below average, thanks to the fact that we're going to be in a La Nina pattern, especially more so right around southern central Europe. This is a precipitation anomaly forecast from the same computer model over the same time period between September and November, and we clearly see there isn't really many areas with strong anomalies when it comes to how much precipitation you should expect this fall, as for the most part, this computer model is mainly expecting average precipitation right over Europe. I do expect it to be still more moist than usual over Central Europe, thanks to the fact that that's what we typically see during a La Nina. However, like I'm going to show you a little bit later, for Southern Europe, I think it's going to be closer to average, because while you do experience more moist than usual conditions during La Ninas, you guys are currently in a slight drought, and of course with droughts, they're very difficult to get rid of. So if that continues into the fall months, then I'd expect the precipitation to be a little bit closer to average, and potentially less than average if this drought continues into the fall months, which I certainly think is has a good possibility of happening. But when it comes to the western portions of Europe, more so right around Spain and Portugal, I do expect the precipitation anomalies to be a little bit drier than normal, because that's what typically happens during a La Nina. And the fact that this computer model is also showing the same exact or a very similar forecast when it comes to bringing less precipitation over the western portions of Spain and Portugal, that's I do expect a higher amount of confidence that it will be drier than normal for the western portion of Europe. And we also see that right over Norway, there is a small anomaly where the precipitation is a little bit stronger than usual, but the anomaly isn't very strong, so I'd say the precipitation will likely be closer to average rather than maybe slightly above average when it comes to precipitation. So here are the current drought conditions over the entirety of Europe as of the first week of April, and we clearly see that it's much drier than usual right over southern Europe, and more so right around southeastern Europe. This extends into Italy as well. Slovenia, Serbia, as well as Croatia is getting involved with some slightly severe drought conditions, and we also see portions of eastern Spain get involved with some drought conditions. Now, of course, like I've said in a lot of my previous videos, it's very difficult for a drought to go away, mainly because for a drought to exist in the first place, there needs to be a set pattern that's just taking hold of the region for several months most of the time. So if it's already gone on for several months, it could easily go on for an extra couple of months since that pattern was already set in place. We're going to need to see if this continues. Also, during a drought, there's overall less precipitation for the atmosphere to absorb, so that means that conditions will overall more likely stay drier, because it's just an endless cycle with where the moisture just isn't there for the atmosphere to absorb it and to bring precipitation to a lot of these regions. So if this continues into the fall months, I think this should limit the precipitation anomalies, especially for the southern portion of Europe, despite the fact that during La Nina years we do see a little bit more precipitation. This could be an exception this year thanks to the drought we're seeing. We're gonna need to wait and see, but this is a reason why I expect precipitation to be a little bit closer to average for southern Europe rather than slightly above average, despite the fact that we're going to be in a La Nina pattern. Another thing that I think is important to take a look at when determining what type of conditions you should expect this fall is the ocean temperatures, and we clearly see just off the coast of Europe, ocean temperatures are much warmer than usual, and I expect this to continue into the fall months as all the climatology models are forecasting these much warmer than average ocean temperatures to persist into the hurricane season. So I do expect that to continue, and that should help warm up the temperatures quite a bit, especially right up along the coast of Spain, Portugal, into France and the United Kingdom and Ireland as well. So I do expect that temperatures will be probably slightly warmer than average right around Western Europe. For Central Europe, it might not mean much because you guys are a little bit further from the ocean, so you won't necessarily experience the Atlantic moderating in temperatures closer to Central and Eastern Europe. So I still do expect those areas to see cooler than average conditions, because that's what we typically see during La Nina years. But for the western portion of Europe, I expect temperatures to be closer to average, if not maybe slightly above average, thanks to these warmer Atlantic water temperatures. So here's my overall Europe fall forecast for 2024. So for Western Europe, I expect conditions to be drier than normal, thanks to the fact that that's what we typically see during La Nina years. It's also combined with the fact that the computer models are also leaning towards the idea where we're going to see less precipitation than usual, especially right over Spain and Portugal. So I do expect that to continue, and I expect it to be much drier right over eastern Spain thanks to the fact that you guys are already under a pretty severe drought. So I only think it's going to be exacerbated by the fact that we're going to be in a La Nina. And temperatures over this area, by the way, should be closer to average. Typically during La Nina years, it's maybe slightly below average, but I think the warmer Atlantic water temperatures will offset that to the point where temperatures will likely be closer to average as we approach the fall. And then for Central Europe, I do expect it to be colder and more moist than usual. This is what typically happens during La Nina patterns, so this is what you should expect. And while I would say the same for portions of Southern Europe, I do expect the precipitation to be maybe closer to average, thanks to the fact that there is that possibility the drought right over southeastern Europe could continue. So I do believe that'll help moderate the precipitation you experience as we approach the fall. So I just mainly expect the temperatures to be colder with precipitation that's a little bit closer to average. And for northern Europe, I expect the same, colder and more moist than usual conditions right over Finland and Norway. So definitely be prepared for that as we approach the fall months. So of course this is subject to change, so make sure to stay tuned. I will make further fall and winter forecasts for much of Europe, so make sure to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And yeah guys, thank you guys for watching. And if you want even more in detail forecasts regarding what type of fall conditions you should expect in your specific location in Europe, just make sure to comment down below and I'll do my best to try to answer what type conditions you should experience in each area of Europe for the fall months. So make sure to comment down below if you're interested. But that's it for now guys, and I thank you guys for watching.